We're live. And I'm starting the outside webinars now. All right, so we're going to give it about a minute, minute and a half. We're going to let people come into the Zoom. And once we get a fair amount of people in there, we'll kick it right off. So Nick, how's the weather over there?
Well, would you believe that the Irish summer comes in 2 doses, and each dose is about 7 days long. So we're about to have our 10th day of summer, despite being 3 months into it, and it is absolutely glorious. So,
hence the sun on your face from being outside coaching.
I was on my turbo trainer outside. Literally, you drop what you're doing and you run outside no matter what. So a lot of burnt food in the kitchen today. As we went outside to the sun, I had to run back in. No, very good, very nice here. And the Guinness is still cold. The Guinness is still cold, believe it or not. So
I was gonna say it's Ireland, so isn't the food always burnt there, or just like?
There you go, Aaron. That's a true extra.
Nailed it.
That is a true.
Yeah, see,
you are a cultural aficionado by knowing that.
I know.
Isn't it great? She just, Nick sent this out to everyone he knows in Ireland to come on today and watch this, and now you have to, you have to
look at my name. Am I?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Jeez. I only know that because I went there and ordered a steak and learned very quickly they only have one way to cook it. So that's, nothing wrong with that.
They just have your health in mind.
I totally agree.
Sure.
Yeah.
I get it.
You will not get food poisoning.
You
might have a dental bill. You might have a dental bill, but
maybe that's why I went
surely won't get food poisoning.
Well, Guinness is medicinal, correct? Right? That'll cure you if you do get sick. Yeah.
100%. And it also makes you stronger. I mean, my 1RM went up at least for relative to body weight just by having one. So
just by one.
I love it. All right, are you guys ready to start?
Yeah.
All right. Well, I will say, someone said this is the best part of their Thursdays. Michael Hartman. I agree. I only work Thursdays now just for this reason, but don't tell Chris.
Thursday afternoons too.
Yeah, that's it. Other than that, I'm hiding. All right. Welcome, everybody. We are in, is this our 4th week, 5th week?
No, this is 6.
Week?
This is week 6.
Oof,
time flies when you're having fun. Yeah.
I know. So different. So whoever is new to Zoom, I'm just going to give a quick rundown of what we're going to do. I'm sure nobody is new to Zoom, but just in case, this is a little different than just doing a regular presentation. We're going to have 4 presenters on the entire time. So if you go to the top right corner of your Zoom on your computer, there's a view button. Just make sure you guys click on gallery views. That way you can see all 4 presenters up there at the same time. Sometimes we get people saying they can only see one person, so that's the reason. There's a Q&A at the bottom. If you guys want to post questions in there, we're going to go through those probably the last 15 or 20 minutes, and we'll pick out some questions for the presenters to answer. Also, Chris is going to be asking questions to the presenters that they'll be discussing. I am going to be posting the question in the Q&A, so that way if anyone has any or forgets what we're talking about or comes in later, has to leave and come back, you can just check the Q&A and it will be in there for what they're talking about. We are recording these. I know we talked about the Perform Better app numerous times, and surprise, surprise, these are up already. So we already have some of the meeting of minds on there. We've been updating the app constantly. If people can't get it, what I would recommend is deleting the app and then re-downloading it. It usually gets rid of all the problems. So these have been up there. I think the first 3 weeks are up there already. These will be following shortly. And I hope you guys enjoy it. I'll let Chris take over from here.
Yeah. Just make sure you tell them to save their password, Aaron, because you can't remember the password.
We're trying to figure that one out.
So remember, if you're signing into the app, remember your password. Write it down somewhere. Keep the same password, because it's going to correlate with your email address. So, and we haven't figured out how to change that yet, but we are working on that. That is coming. Hey, we're new to the app world, so we're doing all right. Like Aaron said, thanks everyone for joining us today. We got a great panel today. Just a little rundown of what we're going to do to start it off. First of all, we're going to go through the panel. Each person's going to give their own bio. They're going to tell you who they are, what they do, what makes them an expert on this topic. After that, it's only going to be about 3 to 4 minutes each person. After they are done, the Perform Better team has put together a series of questions that we have lined up. We're going to We're going to rotate the questions around. We're going to switch up the person leading, but everyone is going to answer those questions. And we're going to go through those questions that we have, or we're going to go through as many as we possibly can until we get to the last 15, 20 minutes before we open it up and take the people who are live, the attendees who are watching this, their questions as well. So we got a great one today. We're going to get off right now, and we're going to leave it. We're going to start with Nick Winkelman, and Nick, you can lead us off, and we're going to follow it with Brendon Rearick. Mary Kate, you're going to follow Brendon, and Adam, you're going to follow Mary Kate. So that's the order. We're going to go first with their intro. So good luck, guys. Let's knock them
Have
dead
fun.
today.
Chris, Aaron, all the panel. Gosh, I mean, I don't know about all you, but for me, it is absolutely an honor to keep coming back to Perform Better. And I think what a cool way for us to be able to share our knowledge, right? You take one person, you take another person, when you bring them all together, we kind of create this third unique thing that none of us can create on our own. And so I think that's what's so unique about our opportunity today. So as Chris said, my name is Nick Winkelman. I'm presently the head of athletic performance and science for Irish Rugby. That's a real fancy term for I get to work with a lot of cool coaches that help our rugby players and athletes optimize their performance. I very much so see myself as a coach. We're all going to be talking about coaching today. So let me give you my definition of what a coach is. A coach, very simply, is someone who guides another on a journey from where they are to where they want to be. So very much so I see myself as being in a position of servitude to support others. Within this beautiful space of coaching, I have many, many interests like our panel today, but I'd say primarily I am absolutely passionate and really curious about the intersection between what a coach says and how an athlete, client, or patient perceives that, applies it to their body, ultimately with the hope that they can perform better, not only in the moment, but long term. And so very much so I see all of us in the field as being proprietors of OTC, helping whoever we support to quite literally own the change. So today, we will be talking about how to get your clients down with OTC, and I hope you'll join us. So Brendon, I'll hand it over to you, my man.
Mic drop. Love it. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Chris, Aaron, Perform Better, the panel, and then all 92 participants that are here. So I'm looking forward to today, and as Nick mentioned, discussing this topic. This is my 5th year at Perform Better. I've done 3 live Perform Betters, and this is my 2nd virtual year. I began at MBSC, Mike Boyle Strength and Conditioning. That was the platform for my career. And I've heard Nick say this before. He says he learned in dog years at Exos. And when I was at MBSC, I learned in dog years. So in 7 years, I learned about 49 years worth of strength and conditioning, I think. And from there, I moved on to California, where I kind of did my own thing for a little while. And I still teach for Certified Functional Strength Coach, which is a course that we meet people where they're at, and we use exercise selection to either challenge somebody or to make something easier for somebody or give them more options. So we meet the client or the group where we're at, and we go from there. So that's Certified Functional Strength Coach. That's been around now for 6 years. I've been teaching for them, and we're over 8,500 certified coaches. What brought me into this sphere, the art of coaching sphere, was this book that I published last year, Coaching Rules, a how-to manual for successful career in strength and fitness. And my four big categories were communicate clearly, do no harm, keep it simple, and number 4, serve others. So I heard Nick say serve others. That's what we're here to do. Currently what I'm doing, I operate a gym out of my garage. I got the COVID garage gym going. I was supposed to open a big gym and it didn't happen. And I'm actually the strength and conditioning coach at the local high school, where I've really challenged myself, as I have 110 football players in 4,000 square feet, and I have 1 hour, 5 days a week. So that's been my challenge this summer since June, and it's really tested every rule in this book and every little piece of art of coaching you could imagine. So that's where I'm at, and I will hand the baton to Mary Kate.
Hey everyone, my name's Mary Kate Feit. In the industry, I'm probably called MK the most. If you've heard me speak before, you've heard me say that I feel I'm the luckiest person in strength and conditioning. I started training with Mike Boyle when I was 13, and I was on staff before I had a driver's license. So I literally, why am I on this call? I literally grew up coaching. I didn't start my education in exercise science until I was 21 or 22 years old. So I was coaching 7, 8, 9 years. I think every time I talk about this, it grows in how many years. I was coaching, let's call it 9 summers for now, 9 summers without any exercise science background. And I just learned how to coach. You know, I knew Mike's system. I didn't know why we did what we did, but I knew how to coach it. And I think that's what kind of makes me semi-qualified to be on here. I guess in addition to that, I did go on and get my master's in strength and conditioning. I was a collegiate soccer player. I was a college strength coach, counting my GA years for 6 years before I switched over to the private sector. I went back to school, got my PhD at Springfield College. I'm currently an assistant professor of strength and conditioning, where I teach mostly our graduate students at the college, as well as the associate director of strength and conditioning, which means I oversee our GA strength and conditioning coach as they run our strength and conditioning program at the college. So that's kind of where I'm at. I'm very passionate about coach education, teaching coaches how to be more effective coaches. And that's kind of what I do every single day. I'm kind of living my dream right now. This morning, I was out at the fields watching my coaches do speed and agility sessions for women's soccer, men's soccer, and field hockey. And I get to stand there and watch them and take down notes and then debrief with them and talk about what they did well, help them troubleshoot, and then go see them have more success the next day. So it's definitely the best job in the world. I'm gonna pass this over to my other half. Go ahead, Adam, you're up.
Thank you, Dr. Feit. Everybody, welcome to today's webinar. It's an honor to be alongside all of you. A quick shout out to Chris, Aaron, and the staff. We went out to the Rhode Island area earlier this week to pick up some equipment. So Brendon, we're also running a garage gym empire out in Western Mass, and can't thank the distribution center and warehouse staff enough for helping me break down some of the equipment and fitting it into our lovely Honda CRV that has seen its years of miles. But my name is Adam Feit, Coach Feit. In many circles, I'm really just known as MK's husband. And so we've been coaching for 15 plus years, and happily, I'd like to think for most of those years, we're going on 10 plus years of marriage. And my current role actually begins tomorrow, but I am sliding into the higher ed world alongside Mary Kate. I will be an assistant professor of exercise science as well, but also teaching the undergrads in our strength conditioning program. I'll also be the newly appointed director of the Wellness Institute at Springfield College, where essentially we're going to be providing wellness initiatives across the entire lifespan through a more developmental and holistic approach. And so I'd like to think with my experiences coaching, I'm a former Division I college coach. I have coached in the NFL, and I've also been in the private sector for a number of years, helping direct and partner Reach Your Potential training in New Jersey. And now, as I said earlier, helping manage what we call TFP or TF performance, Team Fight Performance, where we are serving a family-driven, athlete-centered performance training business for all of our local area youth in Western Massachusetts. Besides the coaching experience, I thought it was a great idea to go back to school too with Mary Kate. So for some, I don't know, incredible, awful reason, we decided to go back to school at the same time while raising our wonderful children who are now 9 and 7. But I went the sports psychology route. I spent the last almost 6 years working as the head strength and sports psychology coach for Precision Nutrition. As many of us know, the largest nutrition coaching and certification company in the world. And through my experiences working on behavior change, modification, and applying a more client-centered lens to the coaching practice, I thought, what a great opportunity to extend my knowledge and really refine my skills as a coach. So moving forward, as I extend my research and coaching interests, I have really found a passion for the psychological side of training. Essentially, as Coach Nick said earlier, you know, this idea of a guide in bringing our clients from where they are now to where they want to be. I've learned it as closing the gap. I'm here to close the gap between our athletes and our coaches, essentially current performance to what their potential could very much be. And so I'm very excited to continue the research in sports psychology, how we can help coaches coaches use these elements of different types of psychological skills and strategies so we can be more effective and more clear with our messages, so it ultimately ties into better performance. So it's an honor to be here alongside all of you. I appreciate the time.
Well, guys, it's an honor to have all of you on here today. And MK, it should be now DMK, shouldn't it? I think that's the correct the correct sequencing of that. All right, so here we go. We're gonna lead off with the questions. If you guys have discussions after everyone answers the questions, feel free to keep it going, and I'll chime in with the next question once I know you guys are done. So first question, Nick, we're gonna start with you. Keep that same order going, but we'll start with you, Nick, this time. How would you define the art of coaching?
So I may have already answered this in my introduction. So let's just review it one more time, because I think it bears repeating. And that is, if we look at what a coach's purpose is, the why of a coach, I do truly believe, I like how Coach Adam said, Coach Feit, I love that, said, we're trying to close the gap. And so another way to state that is to guide individuals on a journey from where they are to where they want to be. And so ultimately, the art of coaching is the skills, habits, and behaviors we use to engage another individual, as Brendon said, to meet another individual where they're at, such that we can understand the endpoint, the destination they would like to arrive at, and work with them through our skills, habits, and behaviors to guide them through the right path to get there. Recognizing that if you work in team sport, like I do in rugby, formerly in the NFL, you have 15, 20, 40 individuals in front of you. And even though they all might have the same destination in mind, I think every coach will recognize that the path required to get there might be slightly different. Some people, it's a flat, it's an easy path. Other individuals, it's uphill. For others still, it's winding through treacherous terrain where they fall backwards again and again and again. And if we think of it in terms metaphorically of mountain climbing, do you have the appropriate tools in your toolbox? Not to pull them up the mountain, but to be a guide, a steward of that process. Understanding when to intervene, but understanding when intervention is actually interference. And I think ultimately our job today is start to elucidate, to shine a light on those skills, habits, and behaviors to support that journey. So Brendon, I'll hand it over to you, my man.
It was great, Nick. When I think of the art of coaching, I think of everything that's not on the sheet of paper or the program in front of you, or everything that's not on the whiteboard. So it's what you see with your eyes. It's the connection that you make with the client or athlete. It's what you feel in your heart. It's the audibles that you call that day. And one of the greatest things I ever heard Coach Boyle say in a meeting when I was very young was that a great coach with a mediocre program will always be more successful than a bad coach with the perfect program, right? So a great coach with a mediocre program will get more out of those individuals than a bad coach with the best program in the entire world, the perfect program, whatever that is. So yeah, really for me, it's everything that is not on a sheet of paper or on a whiteboard. MK?
Yeah, so I agree with everything you guys are saying. I'm going to add a little piece to it though. When I'm evaluating my students who are coaching, they meet with me and they show me those programs, right? And I look at them and I give them feedback, and then they put them forth. When I go and observe them, just like what Brendon just said, I'm looking at all the other things, right? I'm no longer looking at the front squat. I know they plan to do a front squat, right? I'm looking to see at how they're coaching the front squat, or, whatever exercise it is. So I'm looking, I guess, more at what we're calling the art of coaching, is the stuff that I'm observing and providing feedback on, helping them build. I think my challenge here, or the little piece I'm going to put on into it, and I wouldn't have thought about this until I put my PhD hat on, is all this other stuff that we're calling the art of coaching. There's actually research and science behind it, right? So it's kind of like we should almost put it in quotes, the art of coaching, because it is science too. And that's what I'm most interested in, is studying and learning more about these things that we know or we feel should be done, but then finding evidence to prove that it is right? And that it is effective. How can we prove what effective coaching is? How can we do research on coaching behaviors to see which coaching behaviors are the most effective based off data? So I'm definitely going to be coming from the science lens here of that, the art of coaching actually, I think, is the science of coaching. But it happens often that research kind of follows practice, right? We see what's effective in practice and then we use research to support it. And that's something that as the field is changing, I think people are a lot more interested in this art of coaching. And because of that, I hope the research starts to follow behind it so that we can really justify and prove, what's effective and what's not. Go ahead, Coach Adam.
Now you got her wearing the PhD hat now, Brendon. Good work, man. So
sorry.
I'll keep mine to the side, but I love how MK discusses that. And I think kudos to Dr. Brandon Marcello, another contributor to the Perform Better circuit. I met Coach Marcello when I was doing an internship at the Olympic Training Center. This was, 15 years ago. And I remember him in a previous conversation talking, just like MK said, about as practitioners, we're leading the way. And if we continue to be evidence-based, we're going to be years behind, the timeline, right? So he talked about being evidence-led and really bringing these practitioners that maybe they're in the lab, maybe they're, in white coats or behind keyboards, of saying, hey, look, this is what we're doing. This is what we're finding. Let's not find the research to support it. Let's write the research and let's make sure that we're up to date and that we're bringing real life science and application to the quote art of coaching. And Nick, I love how you bring up the idea of, and I wrote this down, when does intervention become interference? Brendon, you'll appreciate this. I got a couple rising freshmen, and all of a sudden I'm trying to teach them dumbbell snatch. And here I am, Nick, with your research and cueing of like, when do I say something? Because I really want to say something right now, and then allowing it to naturally unfold. And how you all talk about, the idea of a bad program and a great coach. For me, the art of coaching comes down to that idea of client-centeredness, of we're not going to treat every single client, every athlete, every person that comes across our inspiration and development equally, but we're going to treat them fairly. And so the art of coaching to me is what is going to be the thing, the exercise, the cue, the way I greet them, the way I don't greet them, how often I give them feedback, how often I don't, those different types of communication strategies and coaching strategies that are going to give the best bang for our buck, whether they're paying us or for the buck of our time. And so for me, everything does come down to how can I make it client-centered? Because there are going to be a lot of things I want to do. There's a lot of things that I learned through the science of coaching. For many years, I thought everybody should do X type of squat and they should do Y type of Olympic lift. And the older I get and the more gray hairs that radiate through this pathetic excuse of a beard, I realize what's the best thing to do in the time that I'm doing it with the person I'm with. And so I really try to reduce it down to that of making it so specific to the person, to the situation, and where we are in their development in the coaching journey.
When I hear you, when I heard you go through all that, it just made me think so much of the art of coaching comes down to logistics. So I use the example of the football team I work with. I have 110 kids I got 4,000 square feet. I don't have the equipment I need, but somehow I have 1 hour to train all of them in the philosophy that I believe to be the best way to train somebody. But logistically, that means I can't do a lot of the things that I would be able to do if I had multiple coaches. I had 10 kids. I had all the equipment available to me. So the part of the art is being able to work with your logistics, right? Because I could, again, write the perfect program for one football player, but for 110 of them over a 12-week span, the logistics ends up being a lot of my answers more so than what would be correct by science terms. So I love that.
Brendon, I love that. I love that point because you're almost starting to naturally bring in the science and the art. Let me offer this up and see what you think.
Mm-hmm.
When we're thinking about logistics and organization, I like to think, okay, what's the purpose? Because when we say that sounds really boring. Like, no, I want to hear about how to engage with people. How do we help them get better? But to your point, if you don't get the logistics and organization right, you never create the moments to step in, connect, and teach. And so what I would think about, just to offer up and build on your perspective, is Logistics are about designing a session, what you do before, during, and after, to maximize the amount of moments you have to see people as they truly are and engage with them as they want to be. And so from that perspective, logistics serves a great purpose. If you don't go in with a plan, you're coaching in the dark, you're shooting whatever moves rather than having purpose. And if you're going to bring purpose to your program, what we might call what to do, you sure as heck better bring purpose to how you're going to bring it to life. And so that's where, in my world, logistics really matters, just to echo your point, my man.
Yeah. Logistics, like you're saying, opens the door for us to be better guides.
Coaching moments.
If you, like you said, if you wanted to hike a mountain and you wanted to take somebody to the top of the mountain with you, you better come with the proper tools and be prepared to hike that mountain and help the people that you're helping get up there. So
I know MK and I, especially from coaching this summer and getting back into the community, the logistics of a garage gym. Do I have the driveway? Do I not have the driveway? What do the fields look like? Nick, you talked about, the environment, but also the constraints, like the pieces of equipment you have or don't have, or, do we always have to do a total body explosive exercise first? Well, you know what? There's going to be chances where you can, and that's okay. And so as long as you understand the art and the science, it's a really great way to validate, what are you doing? What's best in that current moment? MK, I want to throw it to you really quick before we probably get kicked off for the next question. In your role at Springfield College, really mentoring the grad students during a pandemic, and you talk about logistics, and I saw it firsthand, of the pods and sharing equipment, not sharing equipment, sanitizing equipment, to now you have a brand new staff of young coaches who learned one way of logistics and flow. And now you're out there in the mornings while, we've got the kids upstairs, redefining what flow and organization and logistics are. Can you maybe talk about that as you've been able to explore the art of controlling a group, small, medium, or large, and this new normal that we're transitioning into?
Sure. So to add a little context, last year in our weight room at Springfield College, we did not share equipment and we did not come within 9 feet of each other, which meant that they literally stood in a spot for their whole entire workout. And that spot had all the equipment that they needed. And they did that for 50 minutes. They left, we sprayed everything, and then we brought the next group in. So we had our students who are now GAs, they were first year interns. That is how they coached in our weight room, right? And then they come back this fall and we say, we're wearing masks, but you can move, you can share equipment, you can do all these things. So all of a sudden, these students who were used to this very stagnant lift, where they actually were incredibly effective coaches last year. We also had only 36 athletes in at a time, where we'll be closer to 100, 150 now, right? They were so effective because everything was so organized. Everyone was gridded. They could get these great coaching angles, where now everybody's moving. Right. So having these students really sitting down and talking about, okay, where is this exercise going to take place? Where's the second one? Where's the third one? How are they going to rotate? Are there lanes that the athletes can walk through? We had one lift with our football team where athletes were literally leaping over people doing side planks to get to the next station. That obviously wasn't a good option. Right. So helping these students, again, these, professionals, look at their programs and be like, okay, everything is so different. I need to look at these logistics, because otherwise, like you guys just said, I'm running around saving lives instead of forming relationships and correcting technique and doing all those other more important things. By looking at those logistics, building that foundation of where should people be standing, where should I be standing, and what equipment are we using, what equipment are we sharing? By figuring all those out beforehand, they can be much more effective coaches. And again, seeing it to an extreme, because their experience from last year to this year was so different. So it's been really fun seeing those light bulbs kind of turn on as they start to figure this out, with our assistants.
Great job, guys. That was great. Start off with question number one. Hey, B, just a quick touch up, that analogy of climbing the mountain. Was that something like what we did in Brazil when we got about 95% of the way up there, and we had nothing else to go any higher? No ropes, no cliffs.
No ropes, no tools, no anything. But we tried anyways. I don't know if it's the most intelligent thing.
No, you tried. I was smart enough to watch you from the very peak to see you go up that ledge.
That's true. That's true. I did try.
All right, we're going to keep B. We're going to start off with you with question number two. Since we had what is the art of coaching, let's go with what is the science of coaching?
All right. Well, selfishly, I look forward to hearing from the doctors of the group, their definitions. I'm going to give you mine. So as mentioned in the art of coaching, I said it's everything that's not the program or not what's on the whiteboard. To dive a little bit deeper, for me, it's really the program for me is much more objective. So I can see the weight increase. I can change the sets, the reps, the duration. I can see that trend. I can see those results. Whereas the art of coaching is going to be more subjective, right? Because one workout for somebody was the best thing that they ever did and they loved it. And the same exact workout, somebody could absolutely have hated it or been injured. So there's objective that can put numbers to it. It's tangible. And then there's the subjective where it's based off of my interaction with that person, how that person perceived that workout. And to use a very common cliche, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make the horse drink. And then I don't know who this was, but I heard the additional part, which is you can make the horse very, very thirsty, right? So I think of leading the horse to water as the program. That I have, that's tangible. You can't make them drink. That's up to the individual, but I can make them very, very thirsty. That's the art of coaching. Can I make the horse thirstier and more likely to drink what it is that we're presenting them, what we think is going to help them reach their goals as the guide? So yeah, that's my thought process, but I'm very interested to hear what everyone else has to say. So Mary Kate, MK.
Yeah, so I mean, I definitely said that I think everything is a science in the end. But I guess if I really looked at, if you asked me without me putting any thought into it, what is the science of coaching? I would say it's sets, reps, and volume, yardage, those kind of things. It's what you read in a book and then you create the best program ever out of. And then we actually have to accommodate based off all the other things, right? I have a coach right now who is running agility sessions at the end of practice. We all know the science of coaching tells us that's a really bad idea. But we also know that if coach gives us time, we take time whenever we can get it. Because if we say, oh, no, I need it at the beginning, and coach says, well, you're not getting it then, well, then we lose, right? So the science of coaching, even though, again, I think a lot comes back to science, but for the most part, the science of the coaching is what creates that optimal training. I don't even want to say environment because that goes into the coaching, but it's the sets, the reps, the yardage, how much am I progressing per week? It's all those little kind of like the nuts and bolts is what I would consider, when I look at that phrase specifically. Go ahead, Adam.
Yeah, I love the responses so far. I think to add to that, like when I think back to the art of coaching, I think of the adaptability of the practitioner. And when I think of the science, I think of it more of like a structured flexibility, right? Mary Kate and I have an old school refrigerator. It doesn't have an ice maker. We have the ice cube tray, and then eventually, usually me, I forget to fill back up the ice cube tray. So we have cold ice, but it provides some sort of framework and structure to build our sessions, to build our coaching principles, et cetera, regardless of how the ice cubes come out, regardless on if they were in there too long or not long enough, we have some semblance of shape. And as we spent a lot of time homeschooling our children before they were able to go to hybrid last year, I think about the science of coaching, of asking great questions, right? So it really comes down to the 5 W's plus an H for me. Who are the clients that we're serving? What are their training ages? What is their injury history? Where are they in their, as Nick said earlier, their journey towards a better version of themselves, right? What are we going to do? What exercises? What types of splits? What type of rest periods? What type of environment are we going to create? So I think that is, again, a piece of the science. Where are we going to do it? Again, is it a field session? Should I be accommodating some sort of different type of footwear? Is it going to be 95 degrees Fahrenheit out with a high degree of humidity? Okay. The why, I think, comes down to it. Why am I picking this exercise? Again, to keep maybe the Olympic lifting conundrum out there. Why am I always feeling that I need to do an Olympic lift on this day? If they're 11 years old, if they're 12, whatever they may be. And this is not a discussion about they're good or bad. They're going to be right for a certain person in a certain situation. But that idea of why we're doing a certain exercise, why we're writing a program a certain way. When is this going to happen? Where is the science going to come into play? Is it morning? Is it afternoon? Is it an agility after practice? Is it doing Nordics after practice? Is it getting some more repetitive sprints because we're lacking some of those qualities that coach needs? And I think the biggest thing that comes through that line of questioning is after we've accomplished the questioning of who, what, where, why, when, is how. These are the exercises. These are the coaching cues. And again, that could be led by research. These are the situations that we put ourselves in and as coaches to write a scientifically sound and sustainable program that our clients will do today, and they'll continue to do because they have the proper support and resources around them. And so that's how maybe I would define the science, is essentially a lot of great questions to help drive the decisions that we make moving forward. But I'd love to hear from Nick and his experiences, especially being at the level that he's at now and how he would define it.
Thanks, Adam. So I think I'm excited for this because I talk about coaching, the critical importance of our academic path and our certification path. Like many people on here, did the undergrad, did the master's, did the PhD, went through all the certifications, and very much so aware that we have a lot of different terminology in our industry. And I think when we talk about the science of coaching right now, we're already going to see the definitions I'm going to present are going to be a fourth and slightly depart from what we've heard so far. And so I'd love to see the discussion that ensues. And the first distinction I'd like to make, we've talked about art and science. If we just talk about the word coaching, for me, I believe that coaching, right, as a verb, as an action, I think of it as the act of coaching. And the act of coaching, we've all given definitions, is how do I translate a program into a person? How do I get it off the page and into the person? Adam, you used the word how. And so when I think of coaching, I find coaching is the vessel, it's the vehicle by which we get the program into the person. It helps us understand how to take an exercise, which is what to do, and figure out how to coach it so that the athlete, client, or patient knows how to do it themselves. And so when we look at coaching and the science of coaching, we can talk about it in two ways, right? MK, you talked about the science of coaching, which absolutely can go down. We start talking about programming and reps and sets. But for me, I'm trying to start to make a distinction. So not to disagree, but make a distinction of, am I talking about programming and the science of program design versus the science of coaching? In my world now, not 10 years ago, but now I draw a distinction there. And so when I think of the programming, I quickly go to, it is the knowledge of what to do, the knowledge of what to do. And it's the sets, it's the reps, it's the biomechanics, it's everything I need from a scaffolding perspective to know what to coach. When I step over here categorically into coaching, I think of it as the knowledge of how to coach it, how to bring it into real life such that the client, patient, or athlete can OTC, own the change. And so now if I think of the science of coaching, what is the purpose of coaching? Coaching is meant to help the athlete learn. They're trying to learn. They're trying to leave our company better than when they came in. They are leaving with something that does not require our reinforcement, feedback, or reminder. As an autonomous person, they're better at the Olympic lift. They're faster in the sprint. They're more decisive in their agility, both in decision-making and in action. So I start to think of, okay, the science of coaching is to facilitate learning. Well, then we zoom into learning. What's the ingredients of learning? Well, attention. We only learn from the things we pay attention to. And so that's why I oftentimes talk about attention as the currency of learning. So ultimately, for me, the science of coaching is how I purposely guide one's attention towards the right information at the right time in the right way to help you learn something, whether it be technical, physical, what have you. And when we look at that, ultimately in my reading, both professionally as just a coach and through the rigorous academic process, which MK and Adam, absolutely, I know what you're going through and what you have been there, it comes down to two major tools. And that is verbal and nonverbal. How do I communicate with the head, so to speak, directly? How do I communicate with you to help you understand what's around you? That's the cueing, that's the feedback, that's the instruction. But then the other piece is nonverbal. How do I set up an environment that you can naturally learn from? Because ultimately movement is the space between client and context, between perceiver and perceived. And my job is to positively influence that, either by influencing the way the athlete thinks about their movement or the way the environment invites them to think about their movement. But all of that is running through the common currency of attention to guide the learning, which ultimately is the underpinning science of what we might refer to as the science of coaching. The final thing I will say is this: how do we draw a distinction? And I don't like it to think of a distinction, but rather like Russian nesting dolls. Art and science must blend and work together. There's a oneness that I don't want to dismiss here. And that is the science of coaching is the ingredients. It is the flour, the salt, the water for the bread. Ultimately, the art of coaching, that is how you bring those ingredients together to make a wonderful meal, a wonderful bread. And we know we can give all of us the same ingredients. We are not going to produce the same meal. And so for me, that's the distinction and how I think I'd like us to start talking about the science of coaching.
Nick, I love your brain. So you've thought about this even further than personally I have, and I love what you're saying, because where I'm getting stuck with my definition and what I'm hearing you say, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is I'm hearing you say like what my definition of science of coaching, art of coaching, is actually the science of programming, and then there's an art of programming. And where I'm getting lost is I'm interchanging the word coaching with programming, and they're not synonymous. They're two different things. So you're talking about the science of actual coaching, right? Where sets, reps, and all that, that's the science of programming, which is also important. And there's an art to it as well, which art of programming we might then call context and logistics. But you're talking about science of coaching, art of coaching, whereas that's where I was maybe getting lost a little bit. So now I'm on the same page with you. I like that. So thank you for making me rethink that.
Well, and just to reinforce, because I believe reinforcement here is important, because I'm spending a lot of time using these two words, because when we're talking about programming and coaching, we all have a lot of intimate relationship to these words. If we just step back, if we step back and we think of it as what to coach and how to coach, what to coach and how to coach. What are the best words in our industry to talk about what to coach? And what are the best words to use to talk about how to coach? And for me in this discussion, programming seems like a pretty okay, safe word on the what piece, and coaching seems like a pretty safe, okay word on the how piece. You need them both. None of this is a statement of importance or hierarchy, but rather just getting our categories clear. As you said, Brendon.
Yeah, Nick, I think you really killed it there. I think, and hopefully I'm not putting my foot in my mouth as an educator, but I think that's a big gap in our education, our exercise science education. We learn so much about physiology and sets and reps. And sometimes we might take a coaching class, right? But I don't want to use the word soft, but it's not research-based. You know what I mean? Which is what I'm talking about. And I know our grad students, we read your book for a book club this summer. And again, it was very research driven, but it was on how do I coach most effectively based upon research, based upon motor learning and development. And, this other science that we're not quite focused on enough. And I think your answer absolutely blew me away. I think you really nailed it. And again, something that, we might touch on it in the education of our undergrad students, but we definitely don't nail it. And I think that's something I'm definitely going to keep promoting at our college, because I think we need more of that for sure.
For me, at least to close up this end of it, and Nick, incredibly thankful, like Brendon said, of clarifying the language that we choose. To MK's point, I think, and maybe this is an organizational issue, maybe this is an institutional issue, or maybe this is just an overall societal issue, is we try to force feed all of what we think are the meats and potatoes of coaching, and it just comes down to programming. Mary Kate's teaching graduate strength conditioning. I will now be teaching undergraduate strength conditioning. And here we are trying to put together a 14-week curriculum of here's all the things that we think you need to know to meet this outcome assessment or objective, or to get you ready for a certification test. And we're sitting at the kitchen table frustrated because we need more time, right? We need more than 50 minutes twice a week and a 2-hour practical per week in one semester to really get down to the nitty gritty of what to do and how to do it. So I think this is my soapbox cry to everybody out there of don't try and force feed. Don't take a fire hose to learning the art and science of coaching. Flip up and the faucet and let it drip and figure out where are the gaps, where are your blind spots in coaching, and see how you can effectively implement that over the course of a lifetime, right? We say it all the time. We've heard it. The day you stop learning is the day, you essentially stop living. Essentially, we're all learning. We're all learning from each other today, and we're learning as we continually drive towards better performance. But if we can just loosen up the restrictions of time-bound objectives, I think that would help. And I think that would really be beneficial for a lot of our young professionals entering the field.
Adam, I got to build on your soapbox. It's the platform, so let's use it. Our number one certification for our industry, at least from strength conditioning, does not have a single chapter on communication. I love them to death, but it's appalling. It's absolutely appalling. Our entire being is relationship building. As you said, Brennan, the only way you can lead them to the water, they can't drink, but you can salt the oats. And why aren't we writing chapters on how to salt the oats? Why aren't we dedicating time? I know in my academic upbringing, I had one motor learning class, and it was not taught from a coaching perspective. It was bench science, which is great. I loved it, but there was a lot of translation that had to occur to actually make relevance in the gym. And so we have to recognize that we have biased inadvertently so much to the what, neglected the how, but the how is ultimately what makes the difference at the interpersonal level. And so I'm with all of you. We have to make a change. That's why, Adam, MK, what a beautiful position at a forward-thinking university that really values and champions this topic to set the tone for the rest of the universities in our space.
Salting the oats. It's my takeaway right there. I like it. I'm gonna use that one in the next conversation that comes up about you can't make them drink. Thanks for that, Nick. All right, Mary Kate, this question number 3 is going to start off with you. What are the biggest mistakes you see when you observe coaches?
Sure. I spend a lot of time obviously observing my students, but also when my students are off at internships, I go visit the sites and I observe there to see what kind of sites we're sending people to. And the biggest one that I've been noticing lately is that we have coaches who are either cheerleaders or personal trainers, right? So I want you to imagine a small group or a big group setting, right? And that's what I'm seeing most. And you've got that coach who's running around yelling, right? Just nonstop, right? Maybe they yell a coaching cue, but they move on before they observe and see what's happening, before they can really make that communication, before they can give effective cues and see if any change or any learning happens, right? Or we have the coach who's trying to be the personal trainer, right? They've got 30 people around them and they're running and they're trying to stop and communicate with one person. And they talk to them so long that the other 29 have been 5 minutes without any feedback. So this is something I've been working on right now with our students is, how do we find the balance between kind of running and owning the room, right? But also giving that individualized feedback and waiting and seeing how they take the feedback and then giving follow-up feedback. I'm not saying this is an easy one. This is the biggest challenge I see for coaches, the biggest quote unquote mistake, but it's a hard one. And it's a hard one to learn and to balance. And I think it takes time and experience, but also reflection on your own coaching practice to see if you're doing a good job with it. So I would say that's the biggest one is how much time should we spend with each athlete as we're working with a big group, and how much should we be communicating with that big group rather than on an individualized level? Again, I don't really have the answer here. I think it's a hard balance. And when you see it happening, it's happening, right? But otherwise you look out there and you see one or the other. So that would be my answer. Go ahead, Adam. What do you got?
Before I get into what I hope is a decent answer to stack up on that, I think to build on yours and how you're getting the coaches at the college is a mistake I see a lot is coaches tend to do exactly what they have just seen and have been a part of. So the idea of modeling is so incredibly important as a younger professional because that's all they know. and they forget to realize, well, you don't have that space, you don't have that equipment, you don't have that support from your coaching staff. And so I think one of the mistakes to add on to what you see in preseason, Mary Kate, is the idea of doing what was already done in a different environment and trying to force it. It's the whole, square hole, round peg type thing. For me personally, and I'm going to put myself out there being vulnerable, is coaches continually looking for what is wrong and what needs to be fixed, adjusted, and assessed. MK and I have a running joke inside our home is, yeah, thank you, Nick. Our kids are into Harry Potter right now. We're reading it and we're going through the movies. She very much calls me like Professor Snape, right? Snape is a character that has an incredible storyline. And again, mind you, we're not through the entire book yet, the series. But he comes off very just out to get the characters, very unapproachable, and is always just with his eye looking for what Harry and his friends are doing wrong. That's how I learned how to coach, because early in my years, I was like, well, I'm here to fix things. I'm here to criticize. I'm here to construct and to build and to make it better, because we say it all the time, right? Remember your ABCs, always be coaching. So I felt this need to always look for what was wrong in my athletes' form, in their motivation, in the way they were talking with other individuals, and how they were communicating with us as a staff, and fixing it right away. Thankfully, after some great training over the years and doing some assessments and being married to an incredible coach and educator, I've learned to not just look for all the dark spots, but rather, start looking for the bright spots. Rather than, go after for what's wrong, ask them how they felt, ask them what they felt went well, and how can we get them to do more of that? Again, things are going to happen, and kudos to Coach Boyle on this one, right? I think we've all heard the story about, your athletes are a reflection of who you are as a coach. So if they come in and they don't even say anything, are they going to know how organized you are, what your coaching cues are, the essentially the energy and enthusiasm of the room? And so I'll say there of coaches' biggest mistake, rushing to fix all the things. You'll be amazed on what corrects itself if you just shut up and give it some time. Secondly, I think what happens a lot with coaches is we spend too much time on physiological and physical assessments that we're not taking time to look at the other side of the coin. And Nick talked about, having these biases. Essentially, I now have a bias towards looking at the other side of the coin. It's not just the physical preparation of it, but what is the mental preparation? But more importantly, what types of personalities do my kids have, right? How do they prefer to be motivated? How do they receive instruction? How do they like to be communicated to and with? And just to throw this out there, I think the world, especially the health and fitness world, learned a lot in the recent years about, things like racial injustice and color blindness. Coaches have a coaching blindness. They automatically assume everybody will respond to the same type of coaching, to the same type of exercises. And we just want to blanketly put over everything and saying, this is how we're doing things. And that couldn't be further from the truth, in my opinion. So I think opening our own eyes, looking at our situations of where we are, whether we're in a garage gym, whether we're personal training, or whether we're running a high level performance club, of let's take a look at this from a different situation. Let's change our vantage point and see how we can go and accomplish this accordingly. So look at things from a different perspective and angle, and you'll be amazed on what's coming up within your own development as a coach. Nick, what about you? What are your thoughts?
I wrote down here, I don't have any more room on this envelope. I got to get another one here in a second. Coaching blindness. I love that. I love that. That's just a really nice way to say, meet an athlete, client, or patient where they're at. So that's a huge one. That's a huge one for me. You talked about the negativity, so maybe I'll just riff off that, Adam, and talk about what I think is really positive about our industry and our people. You dedicate every day to help others thrive. So I think, like, number one, never forget. If you're hearing any of this, I know when I was going to Perform Better, and still when I go to Perform Better, I don't know about any of you, I'm like overwhelmed. I'm like, oh my goodness, I haven't read enough. I am an imposter. But at the end of the day, you're here to get others better. And I just think we can't forget that, despite all of our opportunities for growth. Now, what are some of the opportunities for growth for people? Well, I think if we talk about how to coach, kind of sticking to that as a category, there's two major ways that we can assess it: quantity and quality of our coaching. But actually, therein lies the first big mistake that I see. Are you even aware of your coaching? Are you aware of the interaction between what you say, how you say, when you say it, and the impact on the person in front of you? And so number one, if someone is listening to this and likes what they are hearing, the very first thing you will do, at least from my perspective, is start to be aware. Don't even worry about making a change. Just start to see how people respond to your words, how they respond, Brendon, right, to your logistics, to your program design. Adam, as you said, maybe ask a few more questions so that you can get a little bit more data. Bring your coaching ethos into high definition, because you cannot change what you do not see, right? So you have to make the invisible visible. So that's number one. And we certainly later on could talk about a process. MK, I would imagine, like you, I do a lot of coach evaluation. And so I have a kind of a coach evaluation guide that very much so we allow individuals to be self-guided in their use of that. And so that's number one. Once we become aware, we are aware of two major things. There's the quality of coaching and the quantity. And here I am focusing on verbal coaching. The quantity is a very easy one. Is the number one mistake that I see. We say too much. And absolutely everything I'm saying right now, I have done more times than I care to remember. We provide the athlete, the client, the patient with so much information, it's absolutely impossible that they could focus on all of it. So even if I'm working with MK and I provide her with 3 amazing cues on her Olympic lift, 3 amazing cues, how do I know which one she used? Because she certainly cannot focus on all 3 simultaneously. Am I going to guess? Is she even going to focus on one of them? Or is it just going to become noise? It's like, imagine someone took your breakfast, your lunch, and your dinner, put it into a blender, and then had you drink it. Which meal did you like the most? I don't know. That's kind of what overcoaching is like. But when we bring it down, when it comes to cueing, if I can use that as an example, forgive me here, I can provide 1 cue at a time. Now they can taste, understand, and feel every single word and how it shapes the focus and the feeling that focus is meant to encourage. And so once you're aware, respect the quantity, less is more, brevity is your best friend. When it comes to the quality of coaching, I think we've heard some amazing things, and maybe I will just offer up one that I've been spending more time on. Are you providing monologues or are you engaging in dialogues? If it's monologuing, and Brendon, I got this one from Jenny, so credit to Jenny. I absolutely love this. If I'm monologuing, it's just output only. And I'm not getting that two-way street. I'm not getting that feedback. But when I'm dialoguing, I'm inviting them into their journey, into their learning conversation, asking them, hey, which cue made sense? Which cue did you focus on? How did this make you feel? Hey, we need to make this change. What do you think you can focus on to do that? And let me be very clear, dialogue has to be earned. I think, Brendon, of you working with your younger players, day one, I'm not asking everybody a bunch of questions. Why? Because they don't have the context to provide an answer. But over time, monologue should fade to dialogue. And that is a critical aspect of the quality of coaching, and certainly an area I would encourage everyone to reflect on. So that's me. Brendon, off to you, my man.
I'm gonna take that word that I heard you kept using, Nick, was focus. And I think one of the biggest mistakes I see, and my lens is mostly through working with younger coaches. So I was the internship coordinator at MBSC for 3 years, and then at Certified Functional Strength Coach. All of our certifications end with a 5-exercise practical. So to pass the exam, you actually have to coach, demo, and teach 5 exercises. So having done hundreds of these certifications now, I've seen a lot of different ways that people are going to coach, teach, and do something. And I see a lot of coaches focusing on the wrong things. They're focusing on the very, very micro things instead of the macro things, like the low-hanging fruit. Eventually, we're gonna need the fruit up top, or we're gonna need to go micro, but people go right there first. So for example, coaching neck position when their entire back is rounded, using percentages of maxes when your max is only 95 pounds. There's not a lot of a percentage to use there. Not calling an audible when it's very evident that an audible needs to be called, but you only follow what's on the sheet. So there, and in the book, one of my rules is I call it mowing the lawn when your house is on fire, right? So we want to avoid those situations when our house is on fire, we want to go put the fire out. We don't want to be mowing our lawn. The other, maybe this one's more of a pet peeve, but I'll bring it up, is the curse of knowledge. So I see a lot of trainers and coaches trying to impress people with their right, the latissimus dorsi, their anatomy, how much they know. It ends up you take so much of this energy to impress people that you're not actually helping the individual. So for me, it's really the curse of knowledge. Try not to use abbreviations. Try not to use anatomy. That is not necessarily going to be helpful for the individual or group that you're coaching. Now, if they ask, yes, you can provide that information, but as Nick's saying, less is probably more most of the time. And a big part too is, like you mentioned, I forget what the word you used, Nick, but I call it, I don't want to lecture, right? I want to do, right? Tell me what to do. I love using, I have an acronym. It's PAF, position, action, feel. So tell me the position to get in, tell me the action that's going to happen, and then tell me where I'm supposed to feel it. That's the one I actually forgot to tell a lot of people for a long time. My favorite was when they would do band walks. That, 5 years later, I'd say, hey, where are you feeling that? And they'd rub their quads and go, oh my God, I feel it all in my hamstring. I was like, well, those are your quads, number one. And number two, that is exactly not where I do not want you to feel it there. It should be your glutes. But I had never asked. So position, action, feel, and then let them do it. And what I love about position, action, feel, you're going to get down on the ground, half kneeling position. We're going to push through the front foot like I'm squashing a bug, bring my head to the ceiling, and you should feel it in your quad and your glute. That's a split squat. And then you let them do. So say less, you got 20 seconds to coach it, and then let them do it. And then, like Nick was saying, I've heard Jenny say, I can't remember what book we were reading, but the best way to have a great conversation, it's like you're playing catch, right? I catch the ball, and then I got to throw it back to you. It's not just me catching the ball every time or me only throwing the ball. It's a game of catch. So eventually you get really good at playing the game of catch with your clients and your athletes. So that's, I guess, my 2 cents, because the other 3 answers were so great. It's hard being fourth.
Brendon, I'll riff there for a second.
Yeah.
Because I saw your PAF. I really, really love it. And actually, as I was reading it, I was like, okay, that actually slots into my coaching communication loop really, really well. And that I talk about 2 critical communication moments when you're teaching something for the first time. And I make the notation that we're teaching it for the first time, because tell me if I'm wrong, Brendon, you probably don't need to do the PAF every single time you teach the movement when it's the 100th time they've done the RDL, right? So it's kind of maybe that first time, maybe the first 2 times, or a check-in. Do I have that right?
That is correct, yeah.
Beautiful. So I talk about the difference, if we talk about, kind of a coaching of a description of the movement versus a coaching of the movement or cueing the movement, right? Description for me very much so is your PAF, where I'm providing them the minimum MVI, the minimal viable information. We're throwing a lot of acronyms at people, but the minimal viable information, and here's that word again, so they know what's going to happen. So they know what they're going to do. But for me, there's an additional ingredient. You don't always need to have it. I agree with you. Sometimes you can explain the movement, give them a bit of a demonstration, and let them go. I believe when you're watching someone move, you should watch someone move before you tell them how to move. And so that's really, really critical. So you always start with less. But once I've watched them how to move, after that description, I've got to go from what to how. And I'd be interested with all of you, how many times has an athlete said to you, Coach, I know what to do, I just don't know how to do it. And so I feel that what I refer to as a description, describing a movement, the anatomy, the technical stuff, the feel, the PAF, we need it. It's important. It gives them context. And the amount of that information is kind of based, Adam, what you said earlier, on what that person wants or thinks they want. But ultimately, we have to get to that ... pause point where now we say, to do that, to achieve that, and then we need to offer up some additional language. And that's for me where the cue comes in, where the cue is that the sacred moment before the movement to help them upgrade, to use your word again, the focus, so they get more out of it. So I would just like to offer, we have those 2 different communication channels, what I call a description, which really is your PAF, That's the knowledge. Here's what you got to do. And we start there. But inevitably, they only can take that so far. We got to give them the knowledge of how to do it. And that's where the coaching cue comes in. And I see those as two distinct coaching science skills that coaches can have, be aware of, and monitor how they're working in those two communication channels. So I'd love to hear what people think about that.
I'll chip in there first, Nick. So for me, I look at that idea of, again, knowing what to do, but how do I do it? I want to take some time. And I think this is a challenge for all of us coaches. It may not always be 60 minutes. You may not always have 12 minutes in your A block, right? And again, the idea of adaptability, and we all come from programs where it might be like an athletic factory and we got to move. But imagine if we slowed down and said, you know what, we don't have to do sets of 8 today. We may only get to 5 because I actually took the time to ask the client in real time or in reflective practice that I know Mary Kate does a lot of work in at the college is, where do you feel yourself getting stuck? At what point do things start to confuse you? Where do you feel yourself losing control? And I think as coaches, we have this all or nothing mindset. They either did the exercise correctly or they bombed it completely and I'm the worst coach imaginable. Rather, it's the same thing for the clients, right? What if we could split it down and sequence it and segment it down? Okay. And Brendon, just to use your example, right? Like a half kneeling position. A lot of people don't even know why half kneeling is in the progression. Why not just do everything standing? Well, because we're removing joints that could be dysfunctional in proper positioning and patterning to get what we're looking for. So what if we took that same approach to our cueing, how we want the exercise to be done, and we watch, and then we took some time to say, okay, where did you feel? Or I have an idea of kind of where you lost control or where this might be hard for you. Why don't we open this up? Again, the communication should be hot. It's honest, it's open, and it's two-way. That's that whole dialogue piece. So for me, I'll pause because I'd love to get everybody else's perspective is, what if we slowed it down and we reorganize the outcome of the exercise, whether it's 3 sets of 5 or 3 sets of 8 or whatever it may be, and we actually ask the right questions to have them lead us to that point, that pivotal tipping point where all is good and then chaos ensues.
I'm buying tickets to that show, Adam. So I love that. all day long, all day long. It goes back to the dialogue. You know, I'm trying to speak out of their narrative. I'm trying to speak from their narrative. I'm trying to find the words that work for them. We have to remember it's a bias. You used that word earlier, Adam. We speak from our own place of truth. That's from our own vernacular, from our own language locker, which is colored by our own experiences. The challenge we all have is we go into any relationship, coaching or not, blind. And the best conversationalists and the best relationships that I have ever seen in myself and others are built on my ability to care about you, to get to know you, invite you into the conversation. And this is why dialoguing, asking the right questions is central as a principle to effective coaching. Because here's the coolest thing. Even if you have no idea what to cue, as long as you know what to change, you have a sense of what the priority, Brendon, like you said, if the rounded back versus the neck, they know where they should target. I just simply invite you into the conversation. Even to show you a video, say, hey, we're watching you move. What's odd about that? And I don't know about all of you. When you show an athlete their movement, they're pretty good at spotting the priority. And they're like, oh yeah, my back doesn't look right. They don't know if that's right or wrong, but like that, exactly. What do you think you can focus on to straighten that up? And then a dialogue ensues. Adam, I could not agree more. That is the number one strategy I use when I was trying to help guys get critical technique and start in Excel for the 40-yard dash, is bringing their words into the narrative. Because many of them grew up with different experiences using words and phraseology that I was not familiar with. But quickly I became familiar only when I made a safe space for them to be part of the journey. As I like to say, people don't want a boss, they want a business partner. So I'm all for that, Adam.
Great job, guys, on that one. B, takeaway number 2. No need to mow your yard when your house is on fire. That's a good one. I'm using that one as well. Wrote it down. It's already in the memory. All right, Adam, question number 4. We're going to start this one with you. When should a coach prioritize the art of coaching over the science of coaching and vice versa?
All right. Well, I think based on our discussion so far, right, if everything's a priority, nothing is, but you kind of got to do both, right? So this is a good one for me, and I'll go back to my personal development as a coach. When we focus or prioritize so much on the science, and I'm going to go back and I'll let Mary Kate tell the rest of this story, but I had to submit a video, which is very common in our practice in health and fitness, of coaching movements, right? Brendon, you talked about it with MBSC. And let's just say, I can't believe I got the internship, and I will leave it at that because I was so focused on the exercise names and the critical points and sequence number 3 of the push press, blah, 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 blah. It's much better when Mary Kate tells it. So for me, I think let's start with the art, right? As we've defined it. Once I notice, and I'll keep this brief, once I notice a disconnect with the words that come out of my mouth and the actions that my client takes, I think that's a red flag for me. Okay. I'm saying something in my head, right? Again, we go back to this bias. In my experience, okay, let's all talk about the RDL here, folks. Romanian deadlift, okay, modified deadlift, depending on your school of thought. If you've ever tried to teach a middle schooler how to do an RDL and successfully have done it without ending your marriage or kicking them out, you are an incredible coach. So when we use cues like, squeezing your shoulder blades back, keeping your back flat, push your hips back through the wall, et cetera, and they can't do it, there's a disconnect. So I think the art of that communication strategy and that coaching strategy is finding what are those signaling situations that come up that there is a gap. So one is when there's a disconnect where I'm like, okay, they don't need to know why this is this specific type of hypertrophy. They don't need to know the rate limiting step of glycolysis, but our professors back then told us that was important, right? They're never going to ask that. And if you are, shame on you, because we probably don't know the answer anyway. Number 2 is the idea of building rapport. And again, this is not an all or nothing thing. We don't just stop building rapport once we've created a space. Like Nick said, we're constantly building and rebuilding and reestablishing our relationship in the environment that we've created. So when we're prioritizing this art piece of coaching, I'm looking for the disconnects in the way I'm coaching and presenting myself and how I'm effectively, hopefully, and efficiently managing my training session with my athletes, but also essentially when I am there to build a relationship and to nurture that relationship. And for those trainers and coaches and professionals out in the field that do work with athletes, minor soapbox moment here, it's not just about the kids, it's about who is responsible for the kids, and that's the parents. In my first venture in the private sector, I just went after the kids and I tried to build rapport and I went to all their games and I took selfies on Instagrams. Guess what? Yes, if they don't enjoy training, they won't come back. But if you don't develop a relationship and build rapport with the art of coaching and managing relationships with the parents and the stakeholders probably at Nick's level that we're talking about, it's a lose-lose game. From the science perspective, I think it's super important when you build that into your annual plan, right? Brendon talked about mesos and micro levels. Nick could probably talk to a little bit about at his professional level, but when you're at the end of the season or when you're at the end of a training cycle, are you building in that time to reevaluate the choices and decisions you made? At Precision Nutrition for years, we've consistently talked about outcome-based decision making, right? OBDM, another acronym for people to write down. What was the outcome we got from the decision that we made? Did that bring us closer to the decision we were hoping for, the outcome? Did it bring us further away? Was there no change? And what, based on that information and data, are we going to use to drive the next decision? So for me, it's about what are the KPIs? What are the key performance indicators? Do I have to reevaluate the science of how this session was structured and how this was executed? What are the OKRs, the outcomes and key results? Are we closer to what we thought we were going to be? Are we further away? So not to continually bring this around full circle, because I'd love to get everybody else's perspectives here, that science piece is, let's take the time to, as Nick talked about earlier, how do we know it worked? What if it was it plus that plus them? What is the formula? Did we reduce it down to the simplest level of measurement? And how can I do that effectively? I think as coaches and professionals, we need to do that more often. So that's my answer, and I'm sticking to it. Coach Winkelman?
Awesome. I'll buy a ticket to that show as well. A lot of tickets here. Good.
I got to start printing these tickets off. I'll ask my son.
Yeah, I just need to get out of my house here. We've been on lockdown for like 2 years, so I'm ready to go to any show. Okay, I'm gonna just take a slightly different tilt on answering this based on how we talked about science and art earlier. And I'm going to look at it more because I've been getting this question a lot around those two words of developing my knowledge of what to do and my knowledge of how to do it. So we'll think of it more as, rather than science versus art of coaching, I think they're kind of blended together. It's kind of our programming versus our coaching. In my opinion, if you're a young coach, you really can't appreciate how to cue, how to provide feedback, how to dialogue until you have a canvas with which to paint and utilize those skills. It's kind of like before, if I can continue to use culinary analogies, I have to have my ingredients before I can actually make my meal. And I need to know how to prioritize the order with which those ingredients work together. And so back to a lot of what MK talked about and Adam critically, the individual needs to know what to coach. They need to understand the biomechanics, the coordination, the program design to achieve specific adaptation. They need to have a base level of knowledge in this. And our academic upbringing and our certifications are providing us with that. And so a certain level of achievement needs to be had before we can shift our focus in the how to coach piece. It's almost like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Within our industry, survival depends at baseline foundationally in our knowledge of what to do. If we do not have that, we cannot build the rapport and the engagement pieces, at least from a strength and conditioning perspective. But very quickly, once I'm released into the wild, I've been deemed to have a minimal viable set of skills from a program design and a biomechanical eye perspective. Very quickly, I need to start developing my knowledge of how to coach it. And that's the science and the art of how to coach. So understanding learning, understanding how we influence it through attention and verbal and nonverbal ways of coaching, how we facilitate and bring the program to life. Going back to an earlier answer, I want to keep it remarkably simple. And Adam, I'm going to steal from what you said. From very early on, can you simply connect, tap into, be aware of the impact you, as a variable, because a coach is a variable, are you aware of the impact you have on others? That is step number one in developing your knowledge of how, developing your art and science of coaching. And if people can take just that away, such that, hey, I just gave a cue and that person is looking at me like my head's on backwards. Well, that's a pretty good source of feedback that what I said did not work. How I said it did not work. And if I can't solve that problem, there's this beautiful thing called asking a question. So step one, become aware of your impact on others. And if you don't have any other tools in the toolbox, ask a question. Anybody, the youngest coach, not by age, but by years in the industry, the youngest coach can deploy those two tools while they're developing their knowledge of what. But remembering this, every single coach worth their salt, there's that word again, inevitably comes into a collision, whether or not they're using our words today, and recognizes it's how we connect with others that ultimately makes the difference. So whether or not you like it, you are on a crash course with the knowledge of how, with the art and science of coaching. I think what we're trying to do is encourage you to get on that train sooner, offering you a vocabulary to help you make the invisible visible. So that's my sense of it.
So I think we're all in agreement here that we should prioritize both. The way I'm going to answer this is in the context of a single 60-minute session. So for me, the science of coaching is found sitting in an office. That's where I'm planning what, where we're going to do it, when we're going to do it. And then on the coaching floor, that 60-minute session is the art of coaching. And that's where Nick is calling this the how. And that's how I'm going to deliver the program and who I'm going to deliver it to and how I'm going to make changes or call audibles, or what Adam called being an adaptable coach. So in the context of I know I have a session with a group of athletes between 1 and 2 o'clock. I'm going to spend my time in the office planning or the ingredients, right? Finding what those are, where, what, and when, and then I'm going to deliver that. It's a performance, really. It's a 60-minute performance where I'm going to deliver the how and call my audibles and adapt to the situation. So that is my answer. I'm sticking to that one. MK.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the what versus how too. I think the science versus the art is just overwhelming me at this point because I kind of think they're the same thing now. The more we talk about it, the more I'm like, what's the difference? Like, where are we going with this? They're kind of the same thing. You can't do one without the other. But so what versus how makes a lot more sense to me right now at this moment. A couple of things came to me as I was listening to everybody else. We all know the challenge of being last now, right? One quote that I like and I use all the time is that you need to know the rules before you can break them. I don't know where it's from. I know Mike Boyle is the one that said it to me. But that's a big one for me. You know, until you know those rules, until you have those ingredients, you can't become a chef, right? Until you know those rules, you shouldn't be breaking the rules. You should be following the rules. You should emulate the good coaches that you've seen, right? Emulate first, get as many experience as you can. This is one of my favorite parts about students going out on internships. They come back and they're a little bit more like the place they went to, right? And the more internships they go to, all these pieces start to come together to be one coach, right? I can remember my supervisor, Dr. Margaret Jones, saying to me that when she looked at my program, and we're going into the what now, she could see Mike Boyle, she could see Jeff Oliver, she could see my experience at LSU. You know, she could see all these things kind of coming together, and she could see all of them in my program, but now it was mine, right? It was theirs, now it's mine, because I took all what I thought was the best from all of those and created the wow, right? Or the how, or the what, excuse me. The other thing that I think is kind of interesting is so much, and I'm going back to education here, as professionals, we're taught the what first, right? And I think I heard a couple of you say this, learn your what, and then develop your how. I'm not against that, but I honestly think what made me such an effective coach at a young age was that I learned the how first, and then I learned the what. So that's one thing when young coaches, and I'm talking young 18-year-olds, come up to me and they say, what should I do? You know, what should I plan out the next 4 years to become a great coach? I say, go coach. Like, where should I coach? I don't care. Go coach, right? We need more experience interacting with others, because you're going to learn through so much through those experiences, as long as you're taking the time to reflect and learn from those experiences, right? So the more that we spend actually going out and getting experiences, observing others, learning from others, putting ourselves out there, the more that we're able to develop and get better at going back to the how, or the art of coaching. And I guess that's where I'm going to kind of leave it, because again, I agree with all of you, and my head's spinning a little bit about this art versus science and if it really even matters at all. Anyone want to piggyback anything else before Chris moves us on?
Yeah, I vote for knowledge of wow. I mean, there it is. Don't retract that one, MK. Knowledge of wow is now in the vernacular. That's when the what and how comes together. You get the knowledge of wow. That's expert level Zen master stuff. I love that.
Nick, you took away my takeaway there. Sorry.
I'm sorry, Chris.
It
was too good. It was too good.
I'm going to have to revert back to my second one. That's the MK, another one by you. But I'm assuming all your interns that go to MBSC come back wearing flip-flops, drinking Bud Light Lime, and have 60s and 70s music playing on their iPods, right?
Let's hope not.
All right,
that
Nick.
only works for one person.
I think he's the only one that can get away with flip-flops on the floor, right?
Yeah, he's the only one. There's nobody else.
All right, Nick, we're gonna fifth question. We're gonna start it off with you. What are the coaching skills and habits we should target when developing our craft as coaches?
Okay, so this is right. This is where the rubber meets the road. And if I can just reference back to an earlier answer, if coaching, right, the how piece, we're trying to get, down with OTC, me, OTC is to help them own the change. Okay. Attention. We need their attention to guide their learning, to get them some OTC. So it's how we deal with their attention. And principally, when we think about attention and helping ourselves and thus them capture, keep, and direct it, there are two primary tools at our disposal. But before I talk about those tools, we have to recognize that a coach is not necessary. There is nothing necessary about a coach. My kids learn to stand, walk, run, front flips. I cannot do a front flip, ride a bike, and everything else my son does and daughter does without any coaching. In fact, when I tried to coach my son, he said, "Listen, Dad, thanks, but no thanks." And so there is nothing natural or necessary about a coach. But ultimately, in our endeavors as humans, we've created novel movement, we've created sport, and we've challenged ourselves not just to move as generalists for survival, but to push our movement to elite levels of performance. And so what we find again and again and again, the body-mind couple is really good at good enough. But we operate in a space where people are not satisfied with good enough. It's optimal, it's maximal. And so there's this set point, at least in my observations, where people can get pretty good at skills and movement on their own to a level. But past that level, they can no longer access what is needed to make a change. And so what do they need to access? What do they need to point their attention on? Information. And so then a coach comes up and we see this relationship of client and context. Movement is the space between client and context. It's natural. I am now, as a third party, trying to identify how can I improve that dance? How can I improve that skill expression in someone, as my son did a year ago, learning how to ride a bike, Olympic lift, sprint, change direction, sprint upstairs, whatever the skill is, everything that is physical is included in what I'm referencing. And so when I start to look at that relationship, I recognize there's two variables. There's the client and the context, the perceiver and the perceived. And I, as a coach, I can influence both of those for better or for worse. And so when I think about influencing the person, the client, the perceiver, I typically will do that verbally. I do it verbally so that you are aware that I am offering up a new perspective, a new place to point your attention to get some information that you do not have, to get a puzzle piece that you currently do not have. And that's typically when we talk about skills, verbal is the heading. That's your descriptions, your PAF, as Brendon talked about. That's your specific coaching cues you use to craft, nudge, and shape the movement. That's your feedback, what you do after the movement, what I refer to as a debrief. It's the language you use before, during, and after to build relationships and cultivate movement. That's all the verbal ingredients. But then there's another way to influence movement. I can do it non-verbally. I can change the context. I can change the environment. And so take for a classic example, someone squatting and their knees are going in. We might offer up to the movement a mini band. And all of a sudden, the tension on the knees turns up the sensory signal at the hips. And the person says, "This doesn't feel right." And they push into the band. With no explicit coaching cue, the environment did the talking and the client did the walking. Adam, you said it earlier. Our word we use in our industry is it's a constraint. We change something about the environment that forces your attention to see it and thereby adjusting the way you move. So in summary, coaches are not necessary, but they are needed to go to an optimal or maximal level. We have a perceiver and perceived that we access verbally and non-verbally. And within those two categories are the skill sets of designing environments and engaging with people holistically using our language. And we could go much deeper than that, but that's my time.
Nick, just a quick build on that. Would you agree that a coach, another thing a coach can provide is just speeding up the learning process?
Well, this is an interesting one, Brendon, because there's two ways to look at it. Yeah, I certainly think we can speed up the learning process.
Okay.
Now, not to do MK's head in here, if I put my science of coaching on, I know the old phrase, early to ripe, early to rotten. If I provide you, if I lift you up the mountain a little bit quicker, you get to a higher point. but you didn't learn how to walk or climb. And so that speed paradigm has to be balanced with the retention. Am I doing it for them? So there's no black and white answer there, but I would just add the context of speed versus them owning it.
Got it. Okay, thank you. Because I heard you talk about where you get to the plateau. That's really where a coach can best help you. So I was just curious on your thoughts on, can you get to the plateau faster? But that makes sense. Okay. So what are the coaching skills and habits we should target when developing our craft? So when I hear this question, I think of three things. Can you demo it? Can you cue it? Then can you coach it? So demoing it, we are visual creatures. We watch, we do, mirror neurons. Now there's ways around. If you are not able to demo something, you could use somebody else, you could use video, but for the most part, when you give a really good demo, you nail it. There's a lot of great things that happen. Then can you cue it, as we've been talking about? And then for me, this is the part after you shut up, then that's when you coach it, right? So that's when I'm going to come in and ask that question. I'm going to make that audible. I'm going to insert another cue here to see if that changes the movement. And the big thing is the demoing and the cueing. You get relatively pretty good at those things in a short period of time. Coaching it always can improve for the rest of your life. Like, because you can always make more connections or make a better connection with someone. You can learn new things. So the coaching piece of it, because every individual is different. The coaching piece will always change, whereas the demoing and cueing piece is going to be pretty much the same most of the time. You'll learn a few new things, but the three things for me are demo, cue, and then after those two things, you coach it. So what, Nick, you were saying calling the description, right? So with the description, at some point, you'll master that fairly early in your career, but the second piece, the coaching part of it, you'll never master, you'll just always improve. MK?
Yeah, so, if there was one thing I recommend people work on, based off our conversations today, I'm going to go a little more abstract here. And it's probably because it's the thing I'm so interested in right now. And it's my goal to become the quote unquote expert in this, meaning I'm doing a lot of reading on this right now. And I want to be speaking on it within the next 6 months. It's about reflection as a coach, reflective practice as a coach. And Nick said it earlier, I wrote it down. He said, being aware of your coaching. I've been using Brendon's books with my internship class, where I give them a couple of rules each week to read beforehand. And then throughout the week, they're supposed to reflect on those rules to see how they are performing within those rules. So there's a lot of ways to reflect as a coach. You could journal. You could do as easy as take your sheet, flip it over, and write, how did things go today? There's, lots of steps in the reflective process, and I'm sure hopefully you all hear a lot about it from me later, but I think this is something I can remember being a young coach at MBSC, and my goal was this is crazy now, but to coach as many athletes as possible in one day, right? If I could finish a group 10 minutes early, I could get a bonus group, right? And they thought I was nuts. They told me to go sit down and get some water, right? But I was so busy coaching, I probably wasn't reflecting too much on how well I coached, right? And I think this happens to a lot of us, whether we force it on ourselves like I did, or you're in an environment where you have group after group after group, you just get through the day and you don't actually sit down and go, what went well, what didn't go well, how can I improve next time? How did I feel about how this went? And I think that's such an important piece. And again, when people do this, often they think about their squats weren't low enough. Well, that's not really what I'm talking about from reflection. I'm talking about things like, did I communicate effectively, right? Did I make connections with all the athletes on the floor? Did I use everybody's name at least once? Using all those other pieces that I think are more important, the art of coaching per se, and really taking the time to reflect on it, create goals, and then create changes. And that is what I would encourage everybody to really work on. All these other skills that I think other people will talk about can be improved through this art, through this practice of reflecting on your own coaching practice. Go ahead, Adam.
I got to say this before I forget, just to keep the awareness piece. And I'm so glad Nick brought this up earlier, but without awareness, we can't act, right? And MK, you talk about it all the time about this idea of, what went well, what didn't go well, what can I do next time? I think of it as like the 3 S's, right? What is the thing I need to start doing? What is the thing I need, or things I need to stop doing? And what are the things I need to sustain or keep doing? And for us, again, it always comes back to that meeting our clients, meeting our coaches where they're at, is finding time in that day, right? We're not going to turn this into a banter about, everybody's got the time. It's whether or not you prioritize it. But is that after the session in the 10 minutes, MK, before you coach another group? Is that going to the bathroom and giving yourself an audio note? Is that when you're not listening to gangster rap or heavy death metal or, top 100 pop on the way home, of actually doing that? And you're decoding and you're reflecting back on that day. So I think that is super important. But I want to get back to the original question, and I wrote it down, the skills and habits we should target when developing our craft as coaches. And I think here is a really good opportunity. What do we mean by skills? What do we mean by habits? And where are those skills and habits leading us to? And so, from my work at PN, we define these things. So the skills and the habits, they're directed towards a goal. And that's what we ultimately want to do. We have a goal to be a better coach. We have a goal to coach as much as possible, or maybe it's to get X or Y type of revenue. Whatever the goal is, it's somewhere where we want to go or what to do. The skills are what we need to be able to do to get to those goals. I look at skills as the action words or the gerunds, right? Anything with the ing, right? Public speaking, programming, listening, reflecting, empathizing. To me, those are skills. So going back to the question, what are the skills, but also what are the habits? Behind the skills are the practices. What are the things we're doing to build the skills to get the goals? And the last piece is the actions. And I think this is where, in a world of health and fitness, we hear things, we do things, we offer things. It's habit-based coaching, right? We're here to build your skills and improve your habits. Habits are simply just an accumulation of actions done over time, all the time, every time, where now they become automatic and they become part of that routine. So as I reflect back into the original question, the skills and habits, for me, 3 things come up. Number 1 is having the skills first to question everything, questioning. As a coach, developing our craft, questioning why we're doing things a certain way, questioning why our coaches meant a certain message, or asking clarification. This isn't an opportunity to challenge what has been told to us or given to us, but rather, what if we just took everything as blind faith? What if all of a sudden there was a random health fitness professional that said bilateral squatting was probably not a good idea? And we just either went right into it or we stayed away from it. All right. What if we just had somebody that said, do this, don't do that? If we don't begin to question and have that build of questioning everything around us, how do we grow as coaches? So a skill for me in developing craft is questioning everything. Number 2, enlisting a peer debriefer, enlisting a devil's advocate, enlisting a backseat driver. When MK and I were finishing our dissertations, we both essentially had some mixed methods. So we had some quantitative stuff. MK had a little bit more qualitative stuff. So the conversations and experiences. But what if we don't have somebody to check our blind spots, to check our biases, to say, well, I know you're coming into this coaching situation because you had a bad experience last time. But what if we just park that? What if we just put that to the side? As a young and impressionable coach, everything and all the messages that we get are very easily influenceable on our coaching philosophies and principles. So I think the second skill for a coach is that idea of enlisting the support system around you to challenge what you think to be correct, normal, expected, or rather something else. The last one, I think, is choosing the generalist approach over the specialist approach. As a coach in a field that can do so much, the generalist, I hear it all the time. Well, the jack of all trades is the master of none. But you know what? The jack of all trades is always going to have a job, because that jack of all trades can pick up a hammer, they can pick up a screwdriver, they can pick up a shovel, they can pick up a paintbrush. As a coach, developing into where can I be the best fit for the current model, the institution, the organization, the classroom, or the premier club? that person is going to be invaluable to the person as a stakeholder, as a manager, and as a team member. Then, as you start to build more skills of choosing and enlisting and questioning what you know to be true, then you can start to specialize, and you get to a position where you are known for X service or Y approach in Z situation. And maybe that's where the big money comes in, or maybe that's where the big opportunity comes in. But if you go streamlined, mass pike, 100 miles an hour before exit 10, all of a sudden I am only doing this and providing that, you're going to miss the forest from the trees. So as I wrap all this discussion up in terms of awareness and action, let's get clarity on what are the skills I'm building and how are those skills going to help me achieve the outcome or goal that I'm looking to get after.
Adam, I love how you said enlist a support system. And I think that's so important for coaches who've moved on in their career where they're now the quote unquote boss, right? Because there's no one evaluating them anymore. There's no one giving them feedback anymore. And I think that's when you call up a buddy who owns another gym and you say, hey, can you come in and can you come observe me, right? Can you watch me for a couple hours, watch me lead a staff meeting, watch me, lead a group. Watch me work out, see how my behaviors are around the facility, and then give me feedback on it. Because again, once you get to that level, you're not getting a lot of feedback from people. And if you are, there are people that work for you. And as much as you want that honest feedback, it's probably still skewed slightly, right? So I love that you said that. I think that's such, we can only reflect so much on ourselves. Bringing in that outsider to come in and kind of observe and give us feedback, I think is so, so beneficial.
Here's like the irony, building on what you're saying, MK, and what you said there, Adam, on reflection. Firstly, in case it isn't obvious to everyone listening, coaching is freaking hard. Like it is seriously hard. It is so easy to know programming and just be on this broadcaster of saying the same thing over and over again and pumping out programs. To actually excel at coaching, Adam, I think you said it, you never get to the top. There's not an endpoint, it's a process. So coaching is hard. And that's the first thing to recognize. And that coaching is a collection of habits. And in the same way we recognize with our athletes, clients, and patients, they struggle to develop habits, and they struggle even more to change habits. Every one of the coaching skills that we're talking about becomes codified into you. It becomes habituated into what you say, when you say, and how you say it, to the degree it is as invisible to you as the effort it takes to reach your arm, grab for a glass, and drink a sip of water. It is literally under the hood. And this is the irony of what we're talking about. We are in an industry where people pay us because what they need to get better at is invisible to them. If people just exponentially improve their movement, they wouldn't need us. We've already identified that's not the case, because movement by design is not meant to be a cognitive act. It's meant to be a felt, sensed experience. And interestingly enough, communication and coaching lives in the same ecosystem of the mind. We are not meant to be aware of what we say while we say it. Otherwise, we would trip over our words, as we've all seen in a bad presentation. And so the fact is, it's meant to be under the radar. You are meant to be experiencing yourself coaching rather than meta thinking about it while you're doing it. So it is difficult to learn to coach, to get better at coaching, in the same exact reasons and way that it's difficult to learn how to get better to move. It is identical. And so the irony is, if we can respect that, because we're in the industry propagating that knowledge, shine the mirror back on ourselves. And that goes right back to what MK said. If you don't have an extra source of feedback, if you don't have a mirror and an echo, it makes this remarkably difficult to improve. So reflect and find someone who can enhance that signal. And so MK, I love what you're saying. And that's a bit of my soapbox on why that's so important.
Adam, I love the stuff I love the INGs. I'm stealing that. Lots of INGs. I don't know if anybody here has read the book Peak by Anders Ericsson, but in the book, one of my favorite or most memorable parts was a study that they did with surgeons. So they took a group of surgeons who had been doing surgery for a long time, and they categorized them between the best and the okay ones. And what they found was that the surgeons who only did their surgeries, they didn't do any con ed, they didn't have anybody give them feedback, they didn't pursue any way to get better, that they actually got worse at about 5 years. So everybody got better for about 5 years by just doing surgeries. It's like coaching. So Mary Kate, you're saying, I just wanted to coach as many people as possible. You'll get better doing that. But at some point, there becomes this, right? You're either going to continue to do that and you actually get worse because you start to miss your own biases. You start to get complacent and comfortable. You don't keep up with technology. So the ones who got the best, the surgeons who kept improving, were the ones who had other surgeons sit on their surgeries and give them feedback, went to Con Ed courses, stayed up with the technology, sought out help to get better. So I just love that idea that at 5 years, so yes, the more you coach, the better you get it. But at some point, you're going to have to go, like you were saying, Nick, there's a plateau where you have to go find your own coach, right? If you believe in coaching, coaches need coaches. So at some point, you're going to have that person giving you feedback if you want to reach the next level. Now, you could continue to just coach people and that's fine. But if you really want to be a great coach, you're going to have to make that next step.
All right, B, this one is to you. And then after this question, we're going to go into the attendees questions. So put your questions inside there. But B, we'll start with you on this one. If you could go back to your first year of coaching and give yourself a single piece of advice, what would that be?
Reflect more. Mary Kate, you took my answer. I even have it written in the book. The biggest thing that I didn't do was I went the more I coach, the more programs I write, the better I'll get. And yes, I got better, but I would have improved even more if I had actually gone back and reflected and looked at those programs and checked my results. Because I was just so deep into training as many people and doing as many things and having my hands in as many cookie jars as I could, that I missed a lot of things that I could have made better or improved on because I didn't reflect enough. And that's what I would go back to myself and say, like, hey, slow it down a little bit. Okay, scale, like we were talking about. So you want to go through and you go, why? Why did I pick this exercise? Why did I coach it like that? Could that discussion have gone better? I didn't do that for the first probably 5 to 6 years of my career. So that's what I would go back and tell myself.
Yeah, I almost dittoed you, but I was trying to think as you were saying, and I was like, well, I had my hands in everything. I was so busy. I was coaching nonstop. But honestly, I'm going to go back to something that I think Adam's got me better at. He says ATD all the time, attention to detail. I look back at just like some things, and I hate going back to a training card, but that's the thing that lasts forever, right? Looking at that file and seeing my margins that were like 2.5 inches big, and, you know, my lines were crooked, you know, everything was just a mess, right? And I just think back to then, I was so in it and so coaching and go, that I feel like there's little things that kind of fell through the crack where if I'd slow down and take a breath and kind of looked at my work, I'd be like, I could do this piece better. I could do this piece better. And looking at all those little details, I think would have just made me a professional a little bit quicker, right? Instead of a kid just coaching as much as possible. Go ahead, Adam.
That's where the Professor Snape comes out, Brendon, when I'm like, are you kidding me, MK? Look at this. Like, the word is going into the margin. Like, what are we doing here? So I empathize with the coaches trying to figure out Excel. And thankfully, you know, there are some silver linings of all the digital coaching that's happening. So you don't have to worry about that. For me, if I go back to the first year, so I'm gonna mark my first year like my last year of undergrad into my graduate studies, because that's when I was really coaching a lot. Something that is full circle happening to me right now is saying yes to myself. I didn't say yes to myself at all because I was so fearful of what would happen if I said no to others, no to the 18-hour days, no to being there on Saturday morning, no to that extra opportunity that could turn into a bigger opportunity with a capital O. And I think now that we're in a position, we're a little bit wiser, definitely older, where we can help younger coaches getting into this industry of setting those boundaries. Now, mind you, boundaries can be set in many different ways and fashions. There could be a hard boundary, like a wall. that you really can't scale over, or it could be something a little bit more lower. Let's use a perform better hurdle, for instance, right? But if I don't establish lines and boundaries, how do we give ourselves and how do we give our coaches opportunities to think for themselves and see what works best for them at that current moment in time? Do I regret anything in my coaching career? No. Can I attribute my ruthless savageness of saying yes to everybody else and no to myself for the first year of coaching being an instrumental part of my success? Yes, but it didn't come without consequences. And I think if I go back to that, could I have handled some of those conversations differently with my internship supervisors, with my boss when I started my graduate work, and then eventually who ended up becoming my first boss as a full-time employer? Yeah. And I think that would, in butterfly effect terms from an older movie, hopefully I'm not dating myself too much for the people that are listening. What if I did say yes to myself more early on in my career? Would that have changed where I was, what I was doing, and who I was with? I think it would have. And, thankfully we don't have to find out, but say yes to yourself, folks. There's plenty of years of coaching, but you can't go out there saying yes to everybody else first. Coach Winkelman.
Great. Thank you. Beautiful answers. Right. So let's just use a little trick of Zoom. If I keep my eyes like this and my energy like this, where I'm here, but I'm not present. But if I look right into my camera, it's I'm here and I'm present. There's this instant connection that you get that's unavoidable, that just feels somehow different than when my eyes are slightly down and I'm not quite connected with you. And so there's a couple of different ways to equate this, but energetically, you don't need me to give you any words. You can just feel the difference. If we were to give it a word, we would say presence. Not only what is my presence, but notably, am I present? Am I there? Right? Quite literally, to lean on Eastern philosophy, am I awake? And I had a critical, if you want to call it in Japanese terms, a satori, an awakening moment that triggered the last 10 years of my career, where I had this moment where I felt that my eyes had been turned backwards in my head. And I'd been so focused on the program and the what, I realized that the person that program was meant to influence had been ultimately invisible to me. And I felt like I went from this to this, literally, emotionally, as if I was seeing for the first time. And so I don't believe you need to have X amount of years to engage with that transition. From day one, the one thing, the most valuable thing we can offer another human is our attention, is our presence, is our focus. That would be the number one thing I'd want to go back and engage with earlier.
Nice job, guys. I'm not Chris, by the way. You guys did awesome with those. We only have, we have a couple minutes left, but there is a question that you guys can all answer. So it's a pretty good one. It says, can you take an example exercise and distinguish how you cue, communicate, coach? 1, before the exercise, 2, during the exercise, and 3, after the exercise. I'll let anybody start first.
I'll take the before. PAF, position, action, feel. So what exercise should we use here? I'll use a deadlift, all right? So the position, your feet are gonna be shoulder width. You're going to stand over the kettlebell so that it's in line with your heels. We use a kettlebell deadlift. So the kettlebell is in line with your heels, which forces you to sit back more. I'm going to sit back, butt to the wall. I'm gonna grab that kettlebell. I'm gonna break that kettlebell in half like I'm trying to bend a bar. You should feel your shoulders sit back. You want your back nice and flat like a board. I'm gonna stand up nice and tall like I'm being measured at the doctor. That's the action. And I'm going to replace the kettlebell where I picked it up from with my legs. You should feel it in your quads, your glutes, maybe your shoulders a little bit. Where I don't want you to feel it is in your lower back. Position, action, feel. Who wants to take coaching it during the exercise?
Say nothing.
I
That
was
was
gonna
a-
say,
As the man who wrote the
Yeah.
book on cueing, I was wondering what he was going to say.
all I would say is push, and that's it. Like very, very little.
I think, well, to add some context to that, I think it's important especially for the professional that asked the question, excuse me, a little as possible to not confuse the signal and the noise, right? So again, in strength coach terms, or I just try to keep that in as fewest syllables as possible, right? Is it push? Is it drive? Is it stand fast? Is it tall? And this is something that this is Nick's expertise in, is that idea and that connection between internal and external cueing, and reflecting back on that into question part number 3 of now, how do you tie that all in together? So it can be a very easy path down to living in a van down by the river when you start to overcoach during the movement. I think, great experts have said before, watch your athlete, Vern Gambetta, for instance, watch your athlete, see what happens, watch the sport, see what happens, It doesn't talk about, tell them what is happening. So just being conscious of that.
I think just to riff on that, Adam, for a second, when we talk about talking during a movement, we can think of it as two different things here. Am I talking about timing or tempo, which is probably a better word there, or technique? I would say as a fairly absolute statement, there is no room to talk about technique while they're performing the movement. That's like thinking about my arm reaching while I am reaching it. We do not want to do that. We've all had the sense where we're working with someone on a single leg activity and we say, good job, and they fall over. So that's where it becomes interference rather than informing. What we can, and MK beautifully said, push, we should and can, not we should, we can influence tempo. So push, bum, 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 push, snap, push, push, push. These kind of things for any movement that has a rhythm, that has a tempo, almost like a more engaging, interesting metronome, makes a lot of sense. And so for me, that's how I think about communicating during a movement. If we just add additional one, I'll go very quick on this, like a single leg RDL. Adam, you talked about how difficult it is to coach this. For me, a cue would be put your footprint on the back wall. Right? Put a footprint on the back wall. That's one quick Trojan horse. A lot of biomechanics hidden inside of a simple, accessible cue. So push to the back wall or put your footprint on the back wall to get the hinging pattern. I might say down, up, down, up. Now, based on what I saw, if it looked good, I might say something, how did that feel? I might say, did that feel smooth? Did that feel long? Did that feel good? We'll get a little answer. If it didn't look good, I might say, hey, what did you focus on during that movement? Just a sense check. Did they actually focus on the cue? Many times they're not. And so early in my career, I realized, heck, if I'm going to be cueing, let's make sure it's actually getting into the CD and the CD player and then focusing. And then what I might do is just riff with them to figure out one of 3 things. Am I repeating the cue because it worked? Am I refining the cue because it wasn't quite there, almost but not quite? Or am I retiring the cue because it either backfired or its shelf life is expired and I need to freshen up my language to keep it interesting again? So that's for me how I think about language before, during, and after for a single leg RDL.
All right, guys, that's all we had in the Q&A from the
Awesome.
outside. You guys were amazing today. A lot of great information. The discussions you all had were fantastic, and I think the 4 of you guys, gelled well together. So thank you for all coming on and
Thank
do that.
goodness.
Thank
It
you.
would have been so awkward if you didn't. It would have been really weird.
I was waiting for a fight to break out. Actually, MK and Adam, thank God you were in different floors, so you would have had to like leave your computer if it broke out. But
We had a professional agreement on how to handle ourselves on this for everybody. So
She tied you to the chair already, didn't she?
I think actually she locked the door from the outside, so you couldn't get out of there.
I'm
anyways
stuck
until she let you
downstairs
out.
without any heat, right?
Well, guys, thank you so much. Thanks for our attendees for sticking with us this afternoon. Like I said, you guys were amazing. Like Aaron said earlier, this is going to be on video. We're actually getting them up online right now. So on our PB app, I think we have the first 3, right, Aaron? Or I think 4 is going
First
on
3 are
next
up.
week. And
Yes.
so this should be up in about a week and a half, 2 weeks top. This will be back if you want to review it again and see it on the Perform Better app, and it'll be up in its entirety. So again, you guys were fantastic today. Thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for great discussions and somewhat of a difficult topic, but you guys handled it well, especially having new respect now for the science of coaching and not just the pre-work that's done, but the science of on the field coaching now. I think that was a big takeaway today where Mary Kate, you and Nick emphasized on at the beginning. So thank you again so much. Next week, Aaron, who do we have next week?
I have no idea.
I have no idea. All right.
We have 4 really great presenters coming next
I
week.
knew
There
you
it
didn't
is.
Tune in,
know.
it's a surprise.
I knew you didn't
Audible.
know.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I knew you didn't know. So I just
Are we
wanted
coming
to
back? Or
actually
is this,
set
are we
you
doing
up.
it again? Is
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
So it is-
We're back again
say-
next
Next
week.
week, knowledge of wow. Knowledge of wow.
Well, next week we do have a great topic. It's motivation and professional development. That'll be on September 2nd. Next Thursday, same bat time, same bat channel. This again would be on this will be on Zoom again, but we have the panelists will be Mike Boyle, Geraldine Cooper Smith, Anthony Renner, and Kerry Taylor. So hopefully everyone's still listening out there will join us next week for that one. If you want to check out the rest of the schedule, you can go to performbetter.com, go into the webinar section, and you can see I think Aaron told you at the beginning of this, but we have 17 of these, Aaron. Is it week 17, right? So we're only on next week 7. So we're not even halfway through yet. So we'll be doing these until November. So hopefully everyone will join us back next week. Again, you 4, thank you. Can't wait to go live with you because you got great information. And Mary Kate, that'll be your next topic for next year.
Here we
The
go.
reflect. We already got it. We already know what you're going to speak on. So
Absolutely.
everyone have a great
Thanks,
afternoon.
everybody.
Great talking to everyone. And thank you again.
Awesome
Take
job.
care,
guys.
everybody.
Pleasure.
Thank
See
you.
you,
Thanks, guys.
everyone.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.